A few weeks ago, I played the back nine at St. Andrews on my simulator with early 1900s clubs. I didn't explain anything, I didn't analyze anything, I just played. This episode is about how my decision making changed before I realized it was changing, and why that same thing quietly cost most golfers more shots than bad swings. If you watched the St. Andrews back nine video I posted a few weeks ago, that was me just playing. I wasn't teaching, I wasn't explaining anything, I honestly didn't really know what I was learning yet. I was just sharing my live, honest reaction to playing 9 holes with a set of 100-year-old clubs. I was just hitting shots, reacting, trying to get the ball around with clubs I'd never used before. Now this episode exists because after that round, and after working through the ideas that you just saw in the first 3 episodes of this miniseries, I realized I finally had better language for what was happening during that back nine. So this isn't a replay of that round. It's me going back to it and saying, okay, now I understand why that felt different. And if you didn't see that video, you don't need to. This stands on its own. The round just happens to be the reference point. So before I get back to that round, I want to briefly reset where this series has been. Episode 1 started with something simple. I noticed that when I carried fewer clubs, even modern ones, the game felt easier. Not because I hit better shots, but because the decisions got quieter. It's true. I wasn't negotiating with myself before every swing. Episode 2 zoomed out. I looked at how we got there. How the 14 club rule specialization and equipment design slowly shifted responsibility away from judgment and toward the bag. Not intentionally, just gradually. Episode 3 was about intent over distance. The idea that early clubs weren't designed to hit numbers. They were designed to solve situations, lies, wind, ground, trouble, etc. All of that was still theoretical until I actually played around. Going back into that back nine, I wasn't trying to prove anything. I wasn't chasing a score. I wasn't trying to show that vintage clubs are better. I wasn't trying to reenact history or be nostalgic. I was just curious what would happen if the club stopped giving me certainty. And that change showed up faster than I expected. On the very first tee, I remember saying out loud something like, I don't know where this is going to go. I didn't. That wasn't fear. It was just honesty. With modern clubs, I almost always think I know where the ball's supposed to go, even if it actually doesn't go there. Here, I didn't have that illusion, and that changed what I was willing to attempt. Distance stopped being the first question. Instead, the questions became things like, what do I want the ball to do here? Where can I miss and still keep the hole intact? What happens if this doesn't come off perfectly? Those questions showed up before the swing, not after. And what surprised me was that this didn't feel slower, it felt heavier, in a good way, because the clubs weren't going to rescue a bad assumption. There's a moment early in the round where I hit a shot and just said, okay, it went forward, hooray. At the time, that felt like relief. Looking back, that sentence actually says a lot. My definition of success had shifted. In modern golf, success often means hitting the right number, or at least missing in a way that technology can absorb. Here, success was advancement of the ball, keeping the hole alive, avoiding a mistake that requires something heroic later. That's not romantic, this is practical. One of the biggest changes I noticed was how shot shape moved earlier in the decision process. With modern clubs, at least for me, shape is usually secondary if something I think about at all. I generally pick a club for distance first. With these clubs, that kind of flipped. I had to decide how I wanted the ball to behave before I picked anything. Low shots felt cooperative, high shots felt possible, but optimistic. This wasn't about creativity, it was about consequence. Another moment that stuck with me was a short game decision, about 55 yards, where I was between clubs and nothing was labeled. With modern clubs, that's a lookup problem. Here, it was a judgment problem. I had to decide what kind of shot I wanted first, and then chose the tool that best matched the intent. That small shift happened over and over again. Thinking moved earlier. The responsibility moved earlier. I was playing with just 6 clubs, which is a lot different than playing with 14. St. Andrews amplified this in a way that's hard to explain if you've never played Link's style of golf, even on a simulator. The wind never really leaves the conversation. Even when it's subtle, it's still shaping what feels reasonable. And the ground mattered more than I expected. Shots don't just land, they interact. Modern golf tends to treat control as something that happens in the air. On Link's ground, control happens through interaction with the ground, and that changes how mistakes feel. I didn't make fewer mistakes that day, but they behaved differently. The ball usually moved forward, didn't always go where I wanted, but it rarely punished ambition I hadn't earned. These clubs weren't built to erase mistakes, they were built to limit damage. There are moments where my modern instincts actively worked against me. Times when the situation didn't call for aggression, but my brain still wanted to manufacture something. Those instincts didn't come from the shot in front of me, they came from habit. When I tried to force something the clubs weren't built for, the pushback was immediate. Not dramatic, just firm. And that was clarifying. It showed me how often modern golf encourages us to solve strategic problems with execution alone. It's also important to say this plainly. Not everything worked. There were forced carries where this bag simply just had fewer answers. There were modern design assumptions that didn't leave room for run-up shots. That's not a failure of the clubs, it's a mismatch of eras. There was also a learning curve. Not knowing carry or rollout made some decisions heavier than they needed to be. Familiarity builds confidence, and I was compressing a lot of the learning into one session. And there was something else I didn't fully anticipate. These clubs aren't built for the way most of us practice now. Early clubs were designed for rounds, not volume. They expect pacing and restraint. Once I felt that, especially after breaking a shaft, it reframed the whole experience. It wasn't about fragility, it was about intent. When I stepped back after the round, what stayed with me wasn't a desire to change equipment, it was a change in how I thought about decisions. I noticed myself pausing a little longer, and not to calculate, but to notice. Wind, ground, where trouble actually mattered. I stopped asking whether I could hit a number, and started asking what kind of miss I could live with. That doesn't require vintage clubs, that's portable. And that's really what the whole 4-part series has been circling. Episode 1 showed how fewer clubs quiet decisions. Episode 2 showed how equipment slowly took responsibility away from judgment. Episode 3 showed how intent used to come before distance. That round didn't teach me history, it showed me what those ideas feel like under pressure. I also found myself looking at my modern bag differently. 14 clubs suddenly felt a little busy. Not wrong, just busy. Fewer tools made decisions louder, clearer. So I'm not saying I'm abandoning modern equipment, I'm not. But I am curious what happens when you introduce a little intentional constraint. That curiosity is where this leaves me. Not with answers, just better questions. Now I've got a 1950s bag I want to explore next. And a 1980s bag too. Different eras, different assumptions, same game. Will I play all 14 clubs? Will I play 8? You gotta watch to find out. I'm curious what carries forward and what doesn't. And that's where I'm at right now.